Good morning and welcome to We Live on a Planet. Maybe it's not morning for you, but it's morning for me, and it's Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. This is episode 381. Chilly here in Oswego, New York right now on the lake shores of Lake Ontario. It's 36 degrees. Feels like it's 28. Highs are going to be about 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds are out of the west, 10 miles per hour. It's quiet start, huh? No music, no sound effects, no hoopla. You know why? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is I'm waiting for my Rodecaster Pro to come in. That should be coming in very shortly. And then the app that we use here is now this morning when we went to use it, it is now paid. It's been free for a little over 3 years that I've been utilizing it here. We Live on the Planet. And this morning I went to use it and decide what sound we're going to be using for the show and music or whatnot. And that app I've been using, now they want you to pay. And I'm cheap and I'm not going to purchase it because my Rodecaster Pro is going to take the place of that app and so much more. It's going to make the podcasting game just level 11. I'm turning it to 11. These go to 11. All right. Let's start off with our quote before we dive into our interview with Reesh from Medicine ReMixed. And it was so fun talking with Reesh. He's a doctor out of New York City, orthopedic surgeon. And I was a guest on Medicine ReMixed over a year ago, well over a year ago, with D, Reesh and D. And it was fun. And this conversation is just with Reesh, no D. D is the second half of Medicine ReMixed. He is a psychiatrist or psychiatrist, one of those doctors. All right, let's start off with our quote. This is from Buddha. To keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our mind strong and clear. Buddha. Thank you, Buddha. We have to keep your body in good health. I'm trying to do that best I can. No more smoking, so that's good. I quit smoking and I haven't smoked at all in months, and that feels great. And obviously I'm clean from alcohol now, coming up on 5 years. August will be 5 years for me, and I cannot believe it. I kind of look back at the drunk I used to be, and I can't even believe it. The thought of drinking alcohol right now just, I can't even picture it. And I'm glad that I feel that way about it. Now, the rest of my body, I need to get in shape too. The accident was a year ago for me, and it really kicked my butt, and recovery was slow. A lot of rehab, all that stuff. All right, I'm rambling. Let's stop rambling. Let's get on with this interview with Reesh. Get yourself a cup of coffee or tea or anything that you'd like, and sit back and just relax, kick your feet up, and enjoy. I'll talk to you when the interview is over, so stick around after the interview. We'll be right back on with the interview.
Yo, brother, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect. How about you?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Thank you, Reesh, for taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule being a doctor, and especially what's going on right now at these times. So thanks for coming on to We Live on a Planet, man.
No, thank you for having me, man. It's the pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I've been wondering, there's so many things I want to pick your brain with, and maybe we'll just play a little mental gymnastics if you don't mind.
Please.
All right. So what year did you start Medicine ReMixed? Because I stumbled across you in 2017. Were you kicking before then?
Yeah, so interesting kind of, story behind, Medicine ReMixed. So to answer your question, we hopped on Anchor probably early 2016, where Anchor was a much different platform than it is now, which is obviously, it's one of the most popular ways to host your podcast now. But when we joined, when I initially joined, it was not a podcasting platform at all.
Right.
It was almost like a voice Twitter, you could say. Like, it was almost like you were communicating in voicemails. And one of the reasons I joined is because, so D, my, co-host that, we started a podcast back in, I would say 2011. And this was when obviously you had to set up an RSS feed. You like remote podcasting wasn't really a thing, or at least the technology wasn't there to where it is now. So we, at that point we were, in medical school, and we had, microphones in the same room. D was like, trying to figure out how to, set up the RSS feed. So I think at that point we were using Podbean as our hosting, platform, and then we, set up the RSS feed to distribute to iTunes, which is now, Apple Podcasts. But anyway, after we graduated medical school, we wanted to keep that podcast going. We had recorded maybe only like 12 or 13 episodes. It was very infrequently, published, but we gained a decent following. We were getting like a few thousand downloads per episode. This was like in 2011. And then the dream kind of died after that. We were just like, all right, D's going to be going to train in Alabama. I'm going to be in New York. We don't know how to do this remotely. So we were like, all right, I guess that's it. And the thing that kind of changed the game for us is we got a Facebook message. We had at that point, our podcast was called Laughs by Prescription. And then we had started this blog in medical school called Injury Duty. So it was kind of under the umbrella of Injury Duty. So we had this Injury Duty Facebook page, and we got a Facebook message from this medical student in Poland. I think it was somewhere in Europe. And basically the gist of the message was, hey, like, I'm this medical student, out in Europe, and, there's a bunch of us out here that have listened to all of your podcasts, and we still kind of had like the hip hop like vibe and element, and, had a lot of the similar undertones to Medicine ReMixed back then. Obviously, we were really into comedy and pop culture and sports. So we had all these different elements in our podcasts. And basically the guy was just like, we love your taste in music. We just love the anecdotes that you're sharing about going through medical school, and you guys are funny. Like, I know you guys are probably super busy now, in training, but it would mean the world to us if you kept putting out episodes. And that floored us. That, like, absolutely, that was the first time that I personally felt like the power of the internet, and more specifically social media. Because I was like, if somebody like an ocean away could is even listening to us, and was compelled enough to send us a message like that, I call it was like dream CPR. Our dream died, and then we got this message that was just like, you got to keep going. And the fact that even one person even cared enough to send us a message like that, even though it's nice to see numbers like, oh my God, like, it's not just us that's like listening to these episodes, not just like us and our friends that we, put a gun to their head saying, you better listen to this. Like, that was crazy to us that, we got a real piece of qualitative feedback like that we're fucking with this, like, we love this. Am I allowed to curse, by the way, on your podcast? I guess you could edit it later.
I can try to edit. I've never edited, because I decided a while back at We Live on a Planet that I wanted it to be perfectly imperfect. And so I just kind of go and I don't edit it. But when I first started We Live on a Planet, I marked it as not explicit. And I've gone with, that's okay. I've gone with that, and I don't want to change it now, because for the simple fact that it's 3 years old now, and I do have an audience, and I would hate to have that one day where all of a sudden somebody said, wait a minute, this is out of the norm. It would be like if I was explicit and went non-explicit, the listeners would be like, wait a minute, why is he not dropping F-bombs anymore?
Yeah. Okay. All right. But yeah, I could totally be mindful of that. I wanted to ask you before we started, and I totally forgot. But yeah, I'll be mindful of that. And I should
have told you. I'm sorry. And
no.
Part of me wants to change it. It's funny that we brought this up, because I just talked about this yesterday with a friend of mine, and I said I can't change it now. I just can't, because I'm too deep into it.
Yeah. I guess if you wind up doing an intro to this, you can, just say, keep in mind if there's kids in the car or whatever,
that's what I'll do.
there might be an F-bomb or two.
Right.
But we'll keep it at one for now, unless I really get into something. But so yeah, I guess back to what I was saying to your question of, you know, when we kind of started. So yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, we're deep in our training. Like, you know, I was working like 100-hour weeks, like
Wow.
just like criminal hours. So like, you know, D had a similar experience, and you know, it was a tough time, but like, you know, we really wanted to keep this thing going. You know, we really believed in audio, and like, you know, this was still a time where not everybody was listening to podcasts like they are now.
Right.
So it was still early, but you know, I was desperately looking for a way to keep this going. You know, we tried, you know, different things, but it was just too time consuming. Like to try to, like, because we would do these long form episodes, like, you know, back in the day, they were like an hour long. And then, you know, D would go back and edit it, and, you know, put them up and stuff like that. But it took time. You know, so we were looking for a way to do it remotely. It wasn't really working out. And it wasn't until, gosh, it was probably like late 2015. And, you know, I was deep into podcasts, like, you know, listening to different, you know, my go-tos were like, you know, Tim Ferriss and Gary Vaynerchuk, and like, you know, those guys I would listen to a lot on my commutes. And, you know, I remember Gary talking like late 2015, like about this platform called Anchor, because, you know, he was a guy that, you know, one of the things he's known for was kind of being an early investor in, like, you know, Facebook and Twitter. And so like a lot of people at his Q&As would ask him like, what's the next big thing? What's the next big thing? And you know, he would name like a few things, like Musically, which, you know, is now, you know, TikTok.
Right.
You know, at that point, Musically, it was still like an emerging platform. And in the same breath of, you know, Musically, and he had like one or two others that he would mention, he would consistently mention Anchor as this like voice Twitter kind of a platform. And I kept hearing that, and I was just like, you know, if this is what I think it is, it doesn't sound like it's exactly like the remote solution for podcasting I'm looking for, but if this turns into what I think it could turn into, I think like I would be really good at this. So I hopped on, and like I said, Anchor 1.0 was like this voice Twitter platform. This almost like you had 2 minutes to like tell a story, to sing a song, whatever it was. There really wasn't a lot of people on it at that point. There was a lot of like, you know, not great stuff on there. It was just a lot of people just, you know, whatever, just kind of trying to figure out what this was. It was like exactly that. People were just like kind of having conversations. You had like a news feed, you know, similar to Twitter, where, you know, you could reply to someone's, you know, story or monologue or whatever with like a 1 minute reply. And then you could kind of go back and forth, like almost having a conversation, you know, with someone. It really was this like audio social network kind of a platform.
Yeah.
So, you know, I try to do that. And, you know, it was cool. But then I was like, yo, what if, like, you know, no one's really doing any like real storytelling on this platform? I feel like this is cool, but like, I wonder if I really could use this as a way to like podcast. And what I initially started to do is, like, you know, we used to, like I told you, we started a blog, this injury duty blog in medical school. I was like, you know, what if I could flip some of these, blog posts and, you know, kind of just condense it into 2 minutes. So I would actually start like writing scripts, like, and, you know, trying to flip these stories. And I would literally be doing this like in between cases in the operating room, or like, you know, in the clinic. Like, I was just like, this is 2 minutes. I should be able to do this. And I would post very infrequently, maybe like once a week or whatever. And sometimes I would just go off the dome, and, you know, it would just be like a really particularly tough day in the hospital, and I would just like vent for 2 minutes. And a few of those stories, both the polished ones and the not so polished ones, made it to Anchor's like editors picks. I didn't think anything of it. I still, like, again, I didn't really even know how many people were on this platform, but we still had our like individual social media pages for injury duty. And I used that injury duty, you know, name for our account. I wasn't, you know, I didn't have a personal account. I was still trying to keep the injury duty like dream alive. Right. And so a few of these stories got on Anchor's editors picks. They were promoting it on their Twitter account, and then we got, you know, a bump in followers a little bit on our social media accounts. So I was like, oh my God, like, this is pretty cool. I didn't think anything of it. And, me personally, I was kind of going through an existential crisis in my professional life, because I was just like, do I want to be doing medicine full time? Like, I have all these like creative interests that I want to pursue. And I was actually, really contemplating doing like a non-medical fellowship in like, medical journalism or something. This was like my last year of residency. So orthopedic surgery residency is 5 years. And so in my last year, where most people wind up doing at least a 1 year fellowship after, I was just like, looking at other possibilities of how I could, kind of split my time doing creative stuff and also, the medical stuff. And that's when I serendipitously got this message to our Facebook page again, from Anchor's team, their head of operations at the time, Maya.
Yeah.
She reached out to us, and it's a funny story. And I think we must have done a podcast about this like a while back, just about how crazy this was of a story, because they were trying to email us. And I remember when I first joined Anchor, I had the thought of like, I don't know how long I'm going to have this account. I have so many accounts. Like we're like signing up for so many things. I have like so much spam and this and that. I wasn't even, and so I signed up with an email that I like never checked. And they're like trying to like email us, because basically they were pitching this idea. They got this new round of funding. They're trying to evolve the concept of Anchor, and they really liked the content that I was putting out at the time. So they wanted to reach out to see if we wanted to be part of the beta testing for this Anchor 2.0, which still wasn't really podcasting. They were trying to do like this radio reinvented concept. It almost wind up, the execution of it was like almost like an audio Snapchat. It went from like audio Twitter to audio Snapchat, because Snapchat was popping at the time. They had this thesis that short form audio was like the future, that like 5 or 10 minutes is like for the short attention span of our modern society. That was the thesis that they were running on. So they evolved from the 2-minute audio to like 5-minute
Yes.
segments that you could have. Did you join Anchor at that point?
Yes,
at 2.0?
That's right when I came in. It was only 5-minute segments, and then it would dissolve after 24 hours.
Yeah. So this was early 2017 where they reached out, and I was like, yes,
That's
hell yes. Like I was looking for an opportunity like this. And so, Maya, after trying to chase us on email, winds up, finding our Facebook page. And I'm glad that she went to that next step, because if she didn't, this never, would have been, what wound up being like a really wild and amazing journey with Anchor up until they got acquired by Spotify. So being part of that journey was incredible. And it was serendipitous also because they were a New York City based tech company, which was already kind of unique, because most of the big social networks that we know of are all like Silicon Valley kind of companies. So I was in New York at the time. They were in New York City, so I wound up actually going out to meet them several times, and got pretty close with their founding team. Mike Mignano, their CEO, and Neer, their CTO, and it was super super cool. But yeah, in 2017, they were like, we love the content that you're putting out. And, they even, paid us, like, if we were willing to do, like 10 original minutes a day. And they were like, we'll, kind of help you with your branding. And they were the ones actually that were like, injury duty, when you explain the story behind it, it's cool, but like it doesn't really tell us exactly what you're about. So they encouraged us to come up with like a new name that was like more fitting of the type of content that we were putting out. And the story behind injury duty, I guess, was when we were trying to think of a name for the blog in medical school, we were mostly putting out content about like sports injuries, and like more sports medicine related content, because like I was basically seeing a pattern on ESPN that there was so much medical stuff being talked about, And I was like, man, this is crazy. Like some of this stuff, like I don't even know if I really know. So I kind of used it as a way to like study like orthopedics and
Mm-hmm.
sports medicine. So I was trying to think of a name for this blog. I was like, I could use these like case studies of like athletes getting hurt to like blog about these injuries and kind of like have like a more medical perspective of what's going on. And actually, we wound up getting, quite a little bit of a following on that blog because a lot of like sports writers and people with fantasy teams were using these articles as a way to, kind of learn about these injuries. But the way that the injury duty name came up was I kept getting these notices for jury duty. And because like I have like such a dad joke sense of humor, I was just like jury duty, more like injury duty, like like
Yeah,
injury,
yeah, it's
and
perfect.
then I was like, oh my god, that's the name for the blog. So it that name kind of stuck this whole time. And then I kind of got I got involved because we were friends in medical school. And we really had this passion for education and breaking down these like complex medical things into ways that people could understand, especially when we were just starting out like seeing patients in medical school. Being able to break something down in a way that a patient could understand, it was something that I felt like we weren't really seeing. We weren't seeing that our teachers, our professors were doing. So we really kind of developed a passion for this, and we thought like, what a better vehicle to disseminate this information than the things that people already care about, like pop culture, like, hip hop, like sports, all these different things that we were into outside of medicine and that, other people were also, really into. And then we could, kind of combine our, passion for, all of those things outside of medicine with our, our knowledge inside of medicine. So anyway, like, yeah, like, Dee's experience outside of medicine was in hip hop, production, music production. I was a DJ and a rapper, like in college. So we kind of like used all of those different chops that we accumulated to ultimately produce what wound up being Medicine ReMixed, this like mixtape style of podcasting. So yeah, we changed the name because the anchor guys were like, yeah, the injury duty thing is cool, but like maybe come up with something that like more clearly illustrates like what your podcast
Yeah,
is about, so people aren't confused. And it was great. And they really helped us like kind of develop our brand and kind of build our audience. And they were just like, we'll if you could commit to putting out 10 original minutes a day, we'll kind of take you under our wing and, help you, build your audience, and, we'll promote you. We were a featured, podcast on, I guess at the time it was
yeah,
stations. We were featured station on Anchor. And then Anchor 3.0 wound up, they really did the full pivot into podcasting because, they responded to the market. And, one of the things that I think was a real key to Anchor's success is they really built what their users wanted. And we were a part of that, kind of behind the scenes process of like, what we wanted, because it was cool doing the 5-minute segments, but ultimately, I think what we wanted, and then what I think a lot of their users wanted also, was just the freedom to put out as, whatever length we wanted. And ultimately that wound up manifesting as like, oh, people just want to be able to produce podcasts. And the easiest way to do that. And that's what they delivered on. And I think that's, why, Spotify really saw that, especially with the growth of podcasts. And, that was like an easy and great decision by them to acquire a
yeah. I
company like
couldn't agree
Anchor.
more. They're definitely have been good to me. I'm just a small fish in a really big pond, and they were really
Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
had been good to me, and they'll always be my home as long as they keep doing what they're doing. I'm gonna stick with Anchor because they just released Call In with Friends version 2.0, where now you don't even need to
Yeah.
download the app, and they're really stepping their game up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because when they first started that feature, we were testing that, and the original feature actually was similar. So it's almost like they went back in the beginning, you did not need the app. You could actually just, call somebody on their phone number, and it would
Yeah, I
just record the
remember.
call, and then they brought it into the app. So yeah, the very first few interviews that we didn't, and I thought that was like a real barrier afterwards, like to obviously, they want to bring people into the Anchor ecosystem and have them download the app, but like from a convenience perspective, like just to do interviews very easily, it became like an extra step
Oh,
for your guests to
yeah,
then just be like, oh, okay, I got to download this app, which, like, from the company's perspective, they obviously, want to promote
right.
it, they want to market it, they want, people using it. But like from a creator's perspective, it's like you want it to be as frictionless and seamless as possible for your guests, to just make it easy for them. And ultimately, they wound up coming back to it full circle, which I think is the right move. And, it's similar to like video conferencing platforms like Zoom. You just have to like, send the link out, and, ultimately, people want to use it. They'll download,
Yeah,
the app. So I
I
think
think so
it's a good thing
too.
that they did.
The story that you just told about Medicine ReMixed is awesome, because it just makes you think about, like you said, you could have almost deleted that app. You could have said, you know what, I think I'm done. And so how fortuitous that they found you. And, because I'm glad I found you. When I first stumbled on Anchor, you were featured, and I turned on and I'm like, what the heck is this I'm listening to? Because it was like no other station, because they were calling them stations at the time. And I'm like, this station is
Yeah.
done by professionals. This is no joke. These guys are professionals. And I'm like, I think maybe they're somebody Anchor hired or something, because this is amazing. And I just was blown away. And I still am happy to have you back. I still have that feeling. You know what I feel better about, though? My interview I had with you guys before, I was starstruck, and I don't feel that feeling now. I was
that's
nervous.
no, that's
Yeah, I
good,
was
man.
nervous, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
talked
yeah.
a lot about about a lot of vulnerable things in my life, but I was today really just looking
Yeah.
forward to having you on and picking your brain, and didn't feel that nerves like I had. Now, if you didn't become a doctor, would your dream job be a DJ? Do you think, or what would you do? Or do you think you would have taken over your dad's real famous business? I mean, his business is real popular in Queens, right?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, because yeah, I mean, growing up, none of my behavior really mapped to me, becoming a doctor, because it's not necessarily, I wasn't necessarily really good at, like, science and math.
All
Like
the
I had to
things
really
that
work
doctors need.
much extra, like, yeah, yeah, like, especially the science stuff, obviously, but I had to work so much harder in my science classes than I did in like English and history and music and art. Like all of my behavior mapped more to like a career, some
Right.
kind of a creative field, whether it was like a recording artist, a performing artist, or a writer, author, like, that kind of a thing. But growing up with Indian immigrant parents, I joke, I'm like, in my house, you were going to be one of the 3 Ds, right? You were going to be a doctor, a dentist, or a disappointment. And so, like, neither of my parents are doctors, mind you. And, both of them are from, very, like, humble beginnings. My dad grew up in a village in
A
South
real
India, and I'm
cat.
talking
Yeah,
about like
real
a real
village.
village, not like, yeah, not like, like, it must have been so confusing when he came to America, when he saw places like Greenwich
Yeah.
Village, and it's like, this is a village, like, I'm gonna be fine, I'm not gonna have a problem at all. Like where he's from, like, even still, like, they're living in
Right.
huts, they're sleeping on the floor, they didn't have shoes, like, all that stuff. And they used to brush their teeth. Even still, they used to
Yeah.
have these neem trees where they would like pluck a twig off of this neem tree and, like, kind of like peel the branches, and that's what they
Wow.
would use to brush their teeth. Like, and no indoor plumbing, no refrigerator, like nothing. And so, like, going back, growing up, especially, when we would go back to India and go back to his village, and just saw like, how they live there and how he must have lived. It was like, one of those
Yeah.
things that it doesn't leave you. Like, I just grew up with so much guilt about how easy I had it, like, I'm just like, God, like, this is crazy that people are still living like this in parts of the world. So like those early trips back was really one of the things that, kind of created this like almost like pathologic gratitude of just like, wow, like I didn't have to struggle for anything. And then my mom, she grew up in a city called Hyderabad, also in South India, but she grew up in like the equivalent of like half a studio apartment in New York City with all of her family members, and grew up super poor. She always wanted to be a doctor, but in India, even still today, like, you could either go to medical school if you have a lot of money and you could like buy a spot basically, or like, if you were going to get in what they call the quote, like a merit seat, you would have to be like the top like 1% of like, your class pretty much, or like the entire like country or state or whatever it was. So, she always had this, chip on her shoulder because like, she wasn't able to make it. She like, missed the cutoff by like a few points and, wasn't able to, go after her dream of being a doctor. So in a way, like, she very much like vicariously, like, lived through like, her kids and, especially me, and really kind of pushed me in that direction. And my dad, what's so funny is like, when he came to this country in 1978, 1979, the only other people in the country at the time that were from that part of India were foreign medical graduates, people coming over here to, become doctors here, or other people with money. So, and pretty much everybody, at least that he knew in those circles, like, they, if they weren't already highly educated in India and came over here to become doctors or professionals, they were going to school here. Or, his older sister sponsored him and my dad's older brother to come over. She was a nurse, so she sponsored my dad and my uncle to come over. My uncle wound up going to radiology technology school, so he became like a radiology technician or ultrasound technician. And my dad, he was always a business guy from the come up. Like even in India, he was always trying to sell stuff, like purebred entrepreneur. Like, he grew up on a farm, so he was the one that my grandma would pretty much put out there to like sell eggs and whatever they were growing. And he was doing anything to get money, like fixing chains on bikes, like bicycles, like doing whatever he could to make money in those early days. So he was always, my grandma knew that this guy was going to be an entrepreneur. And when he came over to this country, and my aunt, the one that sponsored him, was like, you should go to school, you get your MBA. He was immediately like, no, this is America. This is like, the land of opportunity. I should have been making money yesterday. Like, it makes no sense for me to go to school to pay to learn how to make money when I already feel like I know how to do that. I'm not trying to work for, and he knew he wasn't going to get into like a top business school here, where in those days, like, if you didn't go to, and even now to a large extent, if you're not going to like the top 10 business schools, like you're not going to get the job in corporate America that, is going to make you those big bucks. But he wanted to start his own business. So he knew, very early on, but he really got looked down on by his community in those days. And most of them, like I'm telling you, were doctors. So like when he would go to these like gatherings of, other Indian immigrants at the time, he would tell me these stories of like these doctors not even wanting to shake his hand because they were like, whoa, this guy works in a flea market. Like, don't even get too close to that guy. Like, it might be contagious. And like, they treated him as like a second class citizen, his own community. And he always had this chip on his shoulder, and he wound up, financially being more successful than any of them, and I remember, yeah. And, like definitely had the last laugh and, but he was at a time where, entrepreneurship obviously wasn't cool. Like, that was just like a synonym for, loser pretty much. Like, this guy didn't go to school, whatever. And then so, coming up, obviously, in my childhood, I saw how much his customers respected him, how much he loved going to work every day, and how excited he was to get up every morning. I was like, I want that. Whatever he's got, like whatever, I'll
Yeah.
have what he's having. You know what I mean? Like, and so I thought I wanted to take over the family business. Like I wanted to do that 100%. And I spent so much time, in his store, growing up, and, just saw how much he loved it and how much, his customers adored him. And it was almost like, I was like, does everybody have this relationship with their jeweler? Like, I was like, it was like it was because like he was like part of people's families, and like, he was like, most of his customers were like blue collar, workers in New York City area. But anyway, when I told my dad, I was like, I don't think I need to go to college. Like I, want to take over the family business. He was like, there's no way I sacrificed what I did so you could be just like me. And I was like, Dad, you make more money than any doctor that I know.
Yeah,
Why
and
do you want me to
everybody
be a
loves you,
doctor
Dad.
so
Everybody
much?
knows my
And
dad. Everybody knows my dad and loves my
yeah,
dad.
yeah, I was like, why wouldn't I want that? And basically what he said to me when I told him that about him making more money than doctors, he was like, son, like I know people that own candy stores that, make $2-3 million a year, but at the end of the day, they just own a candy store, and they don't get the respect that a doctor does. So he still had those feelings, I think, early on, that like almost like that inferiority complex of like, I didn't get respected, by these doctors. And I had that feeling from that point that, my son or my daughter is not going to
Right.
have to go through the same thing as me. So, for him, like respect was like, a big thing. And, my mom, obviously from the other, point, really wanted to become a doctor. And, and it's not a unique story by any means. I think a lot of, parents or children of immigrant
Yeah.
parents have like a similar story of like, kind of being pushed down this path of like, this is the safe route. This is how you get respect. This is how you get a good job that you don't have to worry about job security. And, all of that is, in some sense is true, as we're seeing now in, the COVID-19 situation, like the one group of people that don't really have to worry about losing their job, because what's happening right now is their job, or doctors. So I get where they were coming from, but intrinsically, like, growing up, yeah, I did not want to be a doctor. And it's something that I struggled with throughout my life, and still struggle with, on some level, having this like, identity / existential crisis of like,
Right.
is this what my purpose was? But I think along the way, I found the right reasons. But to your question of like, would I become a DJ? I don't know what I would have become, but I definitely think it would have been something, in the creative fields, whether it was a DJ or like a music producer or
Yeah.
a rapper or a comedian or a writer, or any one of those things. But that's kind of why Medicine ReMixed has meant a lot to me personally, because it just became this creative outlet, that I could kind of combine all of these
Yeah.
different aspects of who I am and all these different things that I'm interested in, and kind of like suture it all together and bring it all to weave it all together, through the medium of audio and
Yeah, I think
podcasting.
it's
And we'll see where
interesting
that goes.
that here I can tell you're creative. I know you're creative. I know it in you, and I find it interesting the field of the doctor that you became is somebody who is very creative, because being an orthopedic surgeon, you're creating and repairing and building, and all doctors do that, but really orthopedic in my mind is really hands-on of creating and being artistic and having to rebuild things. And so it's interesting that you chose that field as opposed to another practice. I
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, and part of that's kind of serendipitous and interesting too, because so when I was 4 years old, my dad's jewelry stores in Queens, and I remember I was at home, and my mom got this phone call, and my grandmother was living with us at the time, And I just remember my mom breaking down in tears and then just frantic. And I was just like kind of overhearing what was going on. She was, I still have this like memory seared in my mind of her in the kitchen, and I'm like, kind of hiding behind the wall, like trying to hear what's going on. And from what I gathered from my 4-year-old brain, I heard that my dad got shot. He got shot in his jewelry store as somebody was trying to rob the store. And in my 4-year-old brain, I'm just like, I from what I know about, bullets and guns is what I know from TV. And I thought, anytime you got shot, no matter where you got shot, you were dead. That's it. Like So I remember going up to my mom and I was just like, Mom, is Dad dead? And she just like breaks down. She's like, no, don't say that. Don't say that. And, she, just hugs me, and then we rushed to the hospital. And, he was taken to, at the time, it was called Booth Memorial Hospital in Queens, in Flushing, Queens. And what happened was, he, his jewelry store was robbed at gunpoint, and he got shot in the leg. His femur shattered, and, the bullet like missed a pretty vital artery, like in his thigh, the femoral artery, by just like a few millimeters. So he was lucky he didn't have like, more of an injury than just like a fractured femur, but winds up, getting treated at this hospital. And, he had, a long road to recovery. And, they thought that, he may have some issues with like a limp or, moving forward, whatever. But he winds up, recovering. And he, for like a few years, he like wore a bulletproof vest to work. And that's just the type of duty is for some people they're just been like, all right,
would have gave up.
That's a wrap on this. There's no way, like, I'm gonna keep. So I often joke, like, my dad's kind of like the Indian, like 50 Cent, like he just gets like,
I find
get
it
rich
so
or die
interesting,
trying. But
the story when your dad, about how he really turned a lemon into lemonade with that surplus of, is it correct? Is it jackets that he ended up washing and stuff like that? Am I right? That is so interesting.
Yeah.
An opportunity where people would have thought he was crazy and turned around. And it's amazing that. Do you want to tell that story real quick? My audience would love it.
Yeah. And yeah, totally. And just to like quickly wrap up that last story, I think the reason I even brought it up is like one of the reasons too that I think being an orthopedic surgeon in particular was like important to my dad, is because this orthopedic surgeon that helped him, this guy Dr. Pankovic, who he really my dad felt like he gave him like a second chance almost, and helped him get back to his life and providing for his family and all of that. So he always like held him in high esteem. And what's so crazy, what's like a full circle moment, kind of tying Anchor and podcasting and the story that I just told all together, is one of the first interviews that I did was with this neurosurgeon, Dr. Ko, who was like a neurosurgeon, but also this like really ridiculous artist. And, I found her on Instagram, and I'm just like, this is totally Medicine ReMixed vibes. So I interview her, and then, we sort of kind of, developed this, friendship on social media. And I saw her posting on her Instagram stories, and she would do these interviews with like, retired doctors, just to kind of get wisdom from these like retired docs. And, this one day I'm watching her IG stories, and she has this caption that says, Dr. Pankovic gives some advice about what it means, to be a good doctor or something. And I'm just like, wait a minute. And it says like he's an orthopedic surgeon. And I'm just like, how many Dr. Pankoviches can there be? And she's based out of New York. I'm like, could this be the guy that like treated my dad? And so I send Dr. Ko a message, and I'm just like, hey, is this by any chance the Dr. Pankovich that was like, you know, the chief of orthopedics at, you know, Booth Memorial Hospital back in the day. And she's actually with him at the time, right? She's doing this like, you know, IG thing in real time. So she gets the message, she responds to me right away, and she's like, yeah, that's the same Dr. Pankovich. And then I just gave like a quick synopsis of like, hey, you know, this is a long shot, but, you know, my dad in 1989 was shot in the leg and, you know, was brought to Booth Memorial Hospital, and Dr. Pankovich treated my dad. And, you know, I guess it's worth a shot. I don't know if he remembers, but yeah, he like owns his jewelry store, and, you know, my mom was frantic, blah, blah, blah. And she asks him, and he was like, yeah, I totally remember that. And I think one of the reasons he probably did is because most of the time when you get gunshot wounds, like, you know, when you, it's kind of a similar story. It's like, you know, gang violence or like some kind of a, like, you know, this is like, okay, I've seen this scenario before. But I think, you know, maybe what stands out is these few moments where it's just like, here's this like, you know, hardworking immigrant dude trying to, you know, provide for his family. His store got robbed. And, you know, probably my mom probably really stuck out because, you know, she could be a memorable figure in a lot of ways just by how, you know, frantic she probably was. And, you know, she, you know, probably asked a ton of questions and, you know, whatever it was. But he was like, yeah, I totally remember, you know, that case. And then she told him that, oh, his son wound up becoming an orthopedic surgeon. And the guy just starts tearing up and crying, like, you know, so moved by like the mystery that is life, you know? Yeah, like it, you know, it's definitely, you know, one of those stories that's just like a profound, I call it like a profound coincidence that like, what are the chances that, you know, could even close that loop? So hopefully, you know, one day I could even make like a short documentary just about that story, or a short podcast episode.
It is crazy.
But
I think
yeah, crazy, right?
I don't
Isn't
know. It's
yeah,
big. Yeah, we have how many people on it, but a lot of times there's that what is it, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever. You know what I mean? There's things you start realizing. You're like, wow, it's not as big as I thought. That's crazy.
Yeah. No, 100%. But yeah, you asked me to tell you about, you know, my dad's kind of come up like turning point moment. So like, you know, I told you, you know, when he came to this country, my aunt really wanted him to get an education. He was like, no. And she was basically like, all right, then you're not going to be living under my roof, you know, kind of like the mom figure. Like, then he was like, okay. He wound up getting, you know, a few odd jobs, you know, in sales. Like he was selling clothes, like in a flea market. And, you know, he wound up working at a jewelry store, you know, at the time, kind of, you know, learning, you know, he just wanted any kind of a sales job. He didn't care what it was. He just wanted to sell, you know, and learn how to sell, learn kind of the inner workings of a business. And, you know, learning about gold and jewelry, he was like, I think this is a good business. You know, I feel like, you know, no matter what, like, you know, gold is like one of these investments that, you know, is going to be a smart investment. So his dream was to start a jewelry store. And he would, you know, tell me these stories of like, you know, during his lunch hour, he would pretty much just kind of study the goldsmiths and see how like they were, you know, molding gold and how they were doing repairs. And you know, one of these, you know, days, like, you know, one of the goldsmiths was just like, hey, you stand here every day, like kind of like, you know, stalking us. Do you actually want to like give this a try? And he was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, this is amazing. So he would literally spend his lunch hours like with these goldsmiths, and they would teach him, you know, how to do all this stuff. And he, you know, was just always like had this dream of starting his jewelry store, but he just didn't have the money. But once he saved up enough money, he was just like, you know, maybe I could sell clothes, you know, and build up to, you know, opening a jewelry store. I just don't have the money right now to have an inventory and, you know, for jewelry, but I think I have enough money to have an inventory for clothes. So, you know, he was doing all right, like, but, you know, he really had no experience like running his own business. And he was like kind of just learning things like, you know, on the street, like, you know, different marketing, you know, kind of techniques of, you know, how to price his things, how to like entice people to buy, but wasn't really doing that well. And he, always had his ear to the street. And one day he heard that there was a shipment from Macy's coming in from, I think, India, and had these designer clothes that were coming in that were selling retail for like, 120 bucks. And somehow like the shipment got damaged because like mold started growing on the clothes, and Macy's was about to like, throw all of these clothes out. So he, gets a call from, a distributor or something like that, kind of, knows that my dad's like this, like hustler kind of kid, and was just like, hey, this is what happened. I'm trying to get rid of these clothes. And would you be interested? And he was just like, all right, give me like a few pairs of them. Let me see if like this is something that I'd be able to do. So he takes like, like 10 of the pieces like home. And he was just like, how am I gonna be able to like flip these? Like I'll be able to get them for real cheap, but no one's gonna buy them with all this mold on it. And he's like thinking about it. He's like having a few beers, like, pondering at like, what his next moves were going to be. And he was living with like a bunch of roommates at the time. And one of the roommates was just like, hey, do we have any bleach left? Like, and he was just like, oh shit. Yeah. I'm just going to bleach the shit out of these clothes. Like he was just like, oh no, we don't have any bleach left, but I'll go with you to the store. He got like a ton of bleach, and he just started like bleaching these clothes like in his bathtub, and it wound up like obviously taking the color out of the clothes and created this like weird like tie-dye kind of a look. And he was just like, huh, that's interesting. I was just like, and he was just like, I think people would maybe buy this, let's see. And like the next day in his store, he sold out of these clothes like in like a few minutes, because like, these were designer clothes that were selling for over $100 in Macy's, and he sold them for like, I don't know, like half the price, or even like a third of the price. And he was just like, all right, I think I have an idea. So he goes back to the distributor guy, gets all of this entire shipment. Hey, you still there? Okay. He gets all the pieces. And he was just like, there's no way that I can bleach all of these clothes in my bathtub. He buys the whole shipment for like, I don't know, like $1,000, few $1,000, whatever. It was like his life savings at that point. And he goes to the dry cleaner or the laundromat, like down his street. And he goes to the owner, and he is like, hey, how much money do you make here a day? And, this was like the early 80s or, late 70s. And the guy was like, $500 a day. And he was like, all right, I'm going to give you $600 a day if you just let me use this laundromat. I'm going to need it for a few days. And the guy was like, okay, sounds like a good deal to me. So he closed his laundromat down. They had however many machines. My dad brought in all the clothes and, just bleached them, and wound up having this whole new inventory of clothes. And he just made an insane profit, like 300, 400, 500% profit on what he invested in those damaged goods that he was able to flip. And then that was his turning point. He had enough money then to transition into jewelry.
Amazing.
And start
so many people
would
have just turned and run from that and just said, I'm not gonna take somebody else's headache. And that is just an amazing, that's the story of a true like American dream story to me. Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's got some good ones, man. He's got a lot of good stories. Like, one of the things that, I was trying to do for a little bit, and I want to get back to it. I started a podcast for him.
I did.
You might have heard him. Yeah, I did 2 episodes. Yeah, I want to keep it going just because, like, I feel like this is such a great way, if nothing else, even if it doesn't turn into anything, there's no, movie being, adapted from these episodes. If nothing else, these are like just good stories to share to my kids and my kids' kids and the next generation. Like, this is how like the generations kind of live on, like we're right? Like, we're the first generation kind of living in this, like, this internet world where, everything that we put out there kind of like lives on forever. But then all of these stories of our, like, I wish I had, like, something like that from my grandparents or my great grandparents to like learn what their life was like. And kind of the interesting things that they went through that I'll never go through or have to go through. So if nothing else, I think kind of leaving that as like an audio photo album or something, like an audio blog, like for your for the generations to come, I think is like a really valuable
I say that
kind of exercise
almost
to do.
Exactly what you said on my podcast often, that I would have loved to have heard what my great grandparents would have said. So we're leaving some kind of legacy. And right now, which podcasts you got in or way later, or excuse me, early into the game. But right now, podcasting, I think, is only like 14 years old. So it's still in black and white, in the sense of like TV sense. So it's still so new.
Yeah.
And I think it is going to just keep blowing up more and more. And more people are going to jump onto it and realize, like you said, that you can leave some kind of audio diary and have it always there. And I like that idea. It's groovy. Man, this was fun. I appreciate your time.
100%.
I got a couple rapid fires that I want to ask you. All right. So Elvis or Beatles?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Beatles. Pineapple on pizza?
Beatles.
Yeah, that's what my wife likes
with
it
jalapeno.
Like that too.
Yes. I love that juxtaposition, but yeah, maybe just plain pineapple. That would have to be a no.
How
but
about
pineapple plus jalapeno, yes.
Do you have one that sticks out?
Ooh, favorite song. The one that comes to mind that I love is kind of like a sleeper underrated hit is called "Get Free" by Major Lazer. Diplo
one of your favorite. That's
Major
your
Lazer,
go-to. And how about
one of my
either a
favorites?
favorite movie or a favorite TV show, like your favorite movie where you can always watch it over and over?
The one that comes to mind is The Shawshank Redemption.
That's a classic.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Love that one. Yeah, I kind of relate to Tim Robbins's character. Like, sometimes I feel like, being in medicine sometimes is kind of like being in a prison, and I feel like I'm Tim Robbins, like just slowly chiseling away, like through the wall, like trying to tunnel out of this prison.
I thank you for what you do as a doctor.
But no,
and saving lives and touching people the way you do, and you're going to do what happened with your father, and there's going to be a little boy or a little girl that's going to be inspired by you, and they're going to in turn do what you did. And I can feel it, because I know you're that type of person who you care, and that's a part of making an awesome doctor and a great person as well. So I can tell you'll touch lives in great ways. I mean that. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're so busy, and I hope you stay healthy and everything like that. And I just appreciate your time.
No, of course, brother. And let me just say, we've interacted.
It's
for
almost 3, because I started
2 years
in
already?
October of 2017.
Yeah. No, and just seeing you evolve, man, as a podcaster, and like I've always said, like you just have like an amazing voice, both like how it sounds, and also just like your perspective and your ability to be vulnerable and share your story, and just being a good listener. And it speaks volumes to why you've been so successful with your podcast. And I'm just glad to
that means a lot
be
to
on
me.
the show.
I
really
do this
appreciate
because
it.
I get something out of it. But when I hear somebody say something like that, it gives me that CPR charge, like you said. So thank you.
100%, man. Yeah.
All right, my friend. Have a good one, and
looking forward
stay healthy.
to connecting again.
All right. Peace. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. Yeah, free. There's also creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Listen to this, too. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Check out anchor.fm today. You can find me at anchor.fm/WLOAP. Hope to hear from you.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I just can't do it the same. I can't do it the same as welcome back, Kata. All right. How was it? Wasn't that fun? I really enjoyed my conversation / interview, whatever it was, with Reesh. And it was just a blast. It was fun just to kind of pick his brain a little bit and talk to him about being a doctor, and then the story with his dad, how cool that was. And interesting, just a fun time. We have more coming up too. We have the 22nd is my interview with Eddie Green from Eddie Green's 101. And then the 29th of this month is with director Andy Palmer. So that's coming up. And then I also have the 13th, I am going to be recording with Kat O'Keefe. I had to reschedule with her because I got my mysterious illness. So we'll be doing with her. I also have an interview with Dr. Get a Headspace, who's a doctor out in England, and I'm going to be talking to her. Also, I'm going to be interviewing Hugo Torres from Hugo's Post, and that will be fun. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of... I'm also interviewing, excuse me, Harris from Universe, the Universe app that we use that powers We Live on a Planet website. Excuse me for 1 minute. I was able to mute my mic and clear my throat. Let me clear my throat. All right. So if you have not subscribed to my website, WLOAP.com, what are you waiting for? I have a giveaway where I'm giving away over $50 worth of value of stuff. All you have to do is subscribe and you're instantly entered to win. It's that easy. WLOAP.com. And then from there too, when you're over there, you can always leave me a voice message to be a part of the show. That would be great. I have an email too, so if you want to leave any messages, I got a message the other day from one of my listeners telling me they really enjoyed the commercial I was in for Carpe. If you want to see that commercial before it airs on national TV, head on over to WLOAP.com, and there's a link in my website to where you can see the commercial that will be on TV. And that was a blast too. I will be talking to Casper and David from Carpe as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on in the show. Let me set you down for a second. There we go. All right, my friends, thank you so much for your time, and I will talk to you Friday. Take care, stay healthy, and do your best today to stay curious and not judgmental the best you can, because I know that's what I'm trying to do. All right, peace.